Good day, this is Professor Will, CVMD PhD. Today is Wednesday, August 19, 2020. It is 5:00:53 seconds a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this is a continuation of my Corona series. But before we get started, let's take a look at something I wrote. In today's video diary, I will be announcing some of my perspectives on Corona, myself being a microbiologist who studied for 25 years plus, and way ahead of my time. I could certainly and confidently tell you that the USA owns the patents and cures for all diseases, especially our most recent, that being COVID-19. Biological warfare originally started and was targeted on farm animals, putting farmers out of business. The pharmaceutical companies are behind the entire scheme and trying to make everyone into a patient. Doctors are master manipulators, persuade extortion from large corporate unions and organizations. Government officials love to play God. If the government had any common sense, they'd know that herd immunity would fade away the virus nearly instantaneously. The globe suffers from an economic crisis or imminent collapse, and COVID-19 is the perfect profitable scheme. Please don't buy into television at this time, because the government is only laughing at you. You see, the real psychopaths are the rich and greedy, such as psychiatrists, government officials, and mass media, etc., etc. Well, I hope my audience enjoyed my presentation. Hope to see you again. Until next time, let's continue on with my Corona research. Ancient part of immune system may underpin severe COVID. Date August 3rd, 2020. Source Columbia University Irving Medical Center. Summary. New genetic and patient analysis suggests severe COVID is linked to overreactive complement, one of the immune system's oldest branches, and excess blood clotting. One of the immune system's oldest branches, called complement, may be influencing the severity of COVID disease, according to a new study from researchers at Columbia University Irving Medical Center. Among other findings linking complement to COVID, the researchers found that people with age-related macular degeneration, a disorder caused by overreactive complement, are at greater risk of developing severe complications and dying from COVID. The connection with complement suggests that existing drugs that inhibit the complement system could help treat patients with severe disease. The study was published on August 3rd in Nature Medicine. The authors also found evidence that clotting activity is linked to COVID severity, and that mutations in certain complement and coagulation genes are associated with hospitalization of COVID patients. Together, these results provide important insights into the pathophysiology of COVID-19 and paint a picture for the role of complement and coagulation pathways in determining clinical outcomes of patients infected with SARS-CoV-2. Findings stem from a study of coronavirus mimicry. The idea to investigate the role of coagulation and complement in COVID began with a sweeping survey of viral mimicry across all viruses on Earth, over 7,000 in all. Viruses have proteins that can mimic certain host proteins to trick the host cells into aiding the virus with completing its life cycle. Beyond the fundamental biological questions that we were interested in addressing, based on our previous work and the work of others, we suspected that identifying those mimics could provide clues about how viruses cause disease. Coronaviruses, the survey found, are masters of mimicry, particularly with proteins involved in coagulation and proteins that make up complement, one of the oldest branches of the human immune system. Complement proteins work a bit like antibodies and help eliminate pathogens by sticking to viruses and bacteria and marking them for destruction. Complement can also increase coagulation and inflammation in the body. Unchecked, these systems can also be quite detrimental. The new coronavirus, by mimicking complement or coagulation proteins, might drive both systems into hyperactive state. Macular degeneration associated with greater COVID mortality. If complement and coagulation influence severity of COVID, people with pre-existing hyperactive complement or coagulation disorders should be more susceptible to the virus. That led researchers to look at COVID patients with macular degeneration, an eye disease caused by overactive complement, as well as common coagulation disorders like thrombosis and hemorrhage. Among 11,000 COVID patients who came to Columbia University Irving Medical Center with suspected COVID-19, the researchers found that over 25% of those with age-related macular degeneration died, compared to the average mortality rate of 8.5% and roughly 20% required intubation. The greater mortality intubation rates could not be explained by differences in the age or sex of the patients. Complement is also more active in obesity and diabetes. It may help explain, at least in part, why people with those conditions also have a greater mortality risk from COVID. People with a history of coagulation disorders also are at increased risk of dying from COVID infection. Coagulation and complement pathways activated. The researchers then examined how gene activity differed in people infected with coronavirus. That analysis revealed a signature in COVID-infected patients indicating that the virus engages and induces robust activation of the body's complement and coagulation systems. We found that complement is one of the most differentially expressed pathways in SARS-CoV-2 infected patients. As part of the immune system, you would expect to see complement activated, but it seems over and above what you'd see in other infections like the flu. Some coagulation and complement genes are associated with hospitalization. More evidence linking severe COVID with coagulation and complement comes from a genetic analysis of thousands of COVID patients from the UK biobank, which contains medical records and genetic data on 500,000 people. The authors found that these variants of several genes that influence complement and coagulation activity are associated with more severe COVID symptoms that required hospitalization. These variants are not necessarily going to determine someone's outcome, but this finding is another line of evidence that complement and coagulation pathways participate in the morbidity and mortality associated with COVID-19. Targeting coagulation and complement. Physicians treating COVID patients have noticed coagulation issues since the beginning of the pandemic, and several clinical trials are underway to determine the best way to use existing anticoagulation treatments. Complement inhibitors are currently used in relatively rare diseases, but at least one clinical trial is testing the idea with COVID patients. I think our findings provide a stronger foundation for the idea that coagulation and complement play a role in COVID. Researchers say and will hopefully inspire others to evaluate this hypothesis and see if it is something that can be useful for fighting the ongoing pandemic. Aging heart cells offers clues to susceptibility of older people to severe COVID-19. Date August 18, 2020. Source University of Cambridge. Summary. Genes that play an important role in allowing SARS-CoV-2 to invade heart cells become more active with age, according to new research. The findings could help explain why age is a major risk factor for dying from COVID-19, with people over 70 years at greater risk, and why the disease can cause heart complications in severe cases including heart failure and inflammation of the heart. When this novel coronavirus first emerged, we expected it to be primarily a respiratory illness, as the virus usually takes hold first in the lungs. But as the pandemic has progressed, we've seen more and more COVID-19 patients, particularly older patients affected by heart problems. This suggests that the virus is capable of invading and damaging heart cells, and that something changes as we age to make this possible. Researchers investigate the link between COVID-19 and heart failure. The researchers examined cells known as cardiomyocytes to see how susceptible they were to infection by the coronavirus. Cardiomyocytes make up the heart muscle and are able to contract and relax, enabling the heart to pump blood around the body. Damage to these cells can affect the ability of the heart muscle to perform, leading to the heart failure. To cause damage, the virus must first enter the cell. SARS-CoV-2 is a coronavirus, spherical in shape with spike proteins on its surface, which it uses to gain entry. The spike protein binds to ACE2, a protein receptor found on the surface of certain cells. The virus is also able to hijack other proteins and enzymes, including TMPRSS2 and cathepsins B and L to gain entry. The researchers compared cardiomyocytes from 5 young, 19-25-year-old males and 5 older, 63 and 78-year-old males, found that the genes that give the body instructions to make these proteins were all significantly more active in cardiomyocytes from the older males. This suggests that there is likely to be more increase in the corresponding proteins in aged cardiomyocytes. As we age, the cells of our heart muscles produce more of the proteins needed by the coronavirus to break into our cells. This makes these cells more vulnerable to damage by the virus, and could be one reason why age is a major risk factor in patients infected with SARS-CoV-2. Some of the proteins encoded by the genes can be inhibited by existing medicines. For example, the anti-inflammatory drug Camistat inhibits TMPRSS2 and has been shown to block SARS-CoV-2 entry in cells grown in the laboratory. The study also suggests new targets for medicines that could be developed, such as compounds blocking binding of the virus to ACE2 that may be beneficial in protecting the heart. The more we learn about the virus and its ability to hijack our cells, the better placed we are to block it, either with existing drugs or by developing new treatments. COVID-19 lockdown caused 50% global reduction in human-linked Earth vibrations. Date July 23, 2020. Source Imperial College of London. Summary. Lack of human activity during the lockdown caused human-linked vibrations in the Earth to drop by an average of 50% between March and May 2020. This quiet period likely caused by the total global effect of social distancing measures closure of services and industry, and drops in tourism and travel. It is the longest and most pronounced quiet period of seismic noise in recorded history. New research led by the Royal Observatory of Belgium and 5 other institutions around the world, including Imperial College of London, showed that the dampening of seismic noise caused by humans was more pronounced in more densely populated areas. The relative quietness allowed researchers to listen in the previously concealed earthquake signals. It could help us differentiate between human and natural seismic noise more clearly than ever before. Our study uniquely highlights just how much human activities impact the solid Earth. It could let us see more clearly than ever what differentiates human and natural noise. Anthropause. Measured by instruments caused by seismometers, seismic noise is caused by vibrations within the Earth, which travel like waves. The waves can be triggered by earthquakes, volcanoes, and BOMBS, but also by daily human activity like travel and industry. Although 2020 has not seen a reduction in earthquakes, the drop in human-caused seismic noise is unprecedented. The strongest drops were found in urban areas, but the study also found signatures of the lockdown on sensors buried hundreds of meters underground and in more remote areas. Human-generated noise usually dampens during quiet periods, like over the Christmas New Year period and Chinese New Year, and during weekends and overnight. However, the drop in vibrations caused by COVID-19 lockdown measures eclipse even those seen during these periods. Some researchers are dubbing this drop an anthropogenic human-caused noise and pollution the anthropause. Good day, this is Professor Will, CBMD PhD on microbiology, computer science, and bioinformatics. Well, hope you enjoyed listening. Until next time, have a great day.